Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to be taking a look at the transit of Jupiter through Cancer, which we will be experiencing this year. We're going to look at this from a mix of what we can expect to see in the world, in our communities, and for us personally. And then we're going to go ahead and take this through sign by sign so that we can see where this is impacting us in our own personal charts. So before we dive into it, I do just want to let you guys know that I am still running the Chart Your Destiny giveaway. So if you would like to be entered to win a free personal reading with me, all you have to do is make sure that you're subscribed, give the video a like, and then comment below with your location. And you don't have to be very specific. You can just say Earth if you don't want to be any more specific than that. And that will enter you to win a free reading. And I will announce the winner on July 1st. Let's go ahead and dive into it. So in terms of dates, we're going to have Jupiter in Cancer from the 9th of June of this year, so in a few weeks from my recording of this, and that will carry through to the 30th of June of next year, 2026. Now, there is one really special date that stands out to me from this as well, which is on August 12th, not only will Jupiter be exalted in Cancer, which we're going to be talking about, but it will be in the degree of its exaltation, which is 14 degrees of Cancer. And it's going to be joined exactly by Venus on that day. And they will not be in aspect to anything else in the sky, at least not by any sort of Ptolemaic or major aspect. And so that does seem like a pretty special date to me. It's been standing out to me, and so I definitely wanted to mention that. So when we're looking at the themes that we're going to dive into, we may see something special about that date, and these themes really coming through quite strongly during that time. Other than that, we do have Jupiter going retrograde on the 11th of November of 2025, 11/11, and that's going to be at 25 degrees and 9 minutes of Cancer. And then it will go direct on the 11th of March of 2026, and that's going to be at 15 degrees and 5 minutes of Cancer. Now, we do have two fascinatingly special things going on also with Jupiter during this time regarding its relationship to Saturn, which is a pretty big deal that has a huge amount to do with worldly affairs as well as the structure of our own lives and what it is that we're doing. So off the bat, once Jupiter jumps into Cancer, we're going to have a building square, which is a bit of a new square that, to Saturn. We had them square in Pisces and Gemini off and on a bit throughout this past year, but we're going to complete that square finally for the last time on the 15th of June of 2025, but suffice it to say, that is very much active from the 9th through the 15th at the very least. Now, on the other end of that, we also, because of the fact that Jupiter is weirdly going retrograde at 25 degrees and 9 minutes, what we also have going on in the sky, and I'll see if I can show that to you with visuals, we also have in November, Saturn turning direct after a period of going retrograde. Saturn will turn direct this November at 25 degrees and 9 minutes of Pisces. So I also want to point that out because that's also quite weird that they are changing direction at the same degree of these different signs, but we won't complete that trine quite yet. But we're getting so close that for the entirety of November, they're within a degree of that trine with each other, and that'll be in the water signs. We also then have next year, and then all the way into 2027, we have 3 actual exact engagements of a trine between them, and those are all going to be in Leo and Aries. So it's a very interesting relationship that we have starting up now with Jupiter. The moment that it goes into Cancer, we've had that square building up, but we also have a really extended trine now that's going to carry us between 2 signs and across 3 different years. So I like that a lot. The relationship between Jupiter and Saturn is about to get pretty good for a while. We just need to clear the last bit of this square first. So let's go ahead and talk about Jupiter itself, the way that I'm approaching this just from the perspective of Jupiter. And this should help us when we're looking at Jupiter in Cancer, but it should also help us to understand what's going on in the whole sign house in which we have Cancer in our charts for the upcoming year as well. So some of the core attributes that are assigned to Jupiter that we perceive in Jupiter is matters of a lot of opportunities. So things that happen to come through for us, things that come to us a little bit more easily than usual, as well as a lot of growth. And that can be both beneficial and otherwise. So sometimes we can see too much of a good thing, of course, with Jupiter as well. But for the most part, this is another attribute that we tend to look at in a positive light. But again, we can also get a lot going on, and we can see how that can be a bit of a double-edged sword. So we do tend to get a little bit busier or feeling the need to focus a lot on the house that Jupiter is transiting in our charts. At least if we're tuned into it, we should be focusing on it quite a bit. We also tend to associate fortune with Jupiter, typically good fortune, and so things going better than usual, easier than usual, and luck. Now, I do just also want to point out at this point that we do also have a bit of an edge with Jupiter when it comes to matters of order. So, of course, yes, there's fortune with Jupiter, but it's kind of, if you consider the Wheel of Fortune as a tarot card, which is associated with Jupiter. From my perspective and from my experience in life of when that has come up and what it's indicated, it's not just a good thing. It really depends on, are you paying attention? Are you putting clean energy into something? Is there something that you are overlooking that Jupiter is trying to bring to your attention? So yes, there can be good fortune, but there can also be changes of fortune if, for instance, we are in a pretty bad relationship with Jupiter as a planet of justice as well. And so that also then brings us into this concept of optimism that comes with Jupiter as well. And this can go also in the direction of a bit too much of a good thing. And so this is usually where we can get a little bit off track with Jupiter, is that we want to say yes to a lot of things, and we can have a huge amount of confidence, including overconfidence. And so there can be a bit of a flying by the seat of your pants kind of energy with Jupiter as well. And it's when that gets out of hand or out of order, or again, it becomes too much of a good thing. In Cancer, this can be strongly associated with food and comfort and drink and things like this. And we can definitely go overboard, and then we can see how that fortune can shift or mutate a little bit into something that maybe we wouldn't associate as something lucky, even though it came from a place of having plenty. To me, there's also a sense of a major opportunity for healing and for safety with Jupiter, especially where it transits in our chart. I tend to recommend to people that if there's anything difficult that you're trying to deal with in a given place in your chart. So for instance, if there are any matters of conditioning or psychological frustrations or even disturbances with certain topics, when Jupiter is coming through an area, it can make you feel very protected. There is this kind of a priestly or almost angelic quality to Jupiter when we are really in tune with that sense of order and justice of Jupiter, where we're almost behaving as though we're dealing with a Saturn and we're really trying to meet it way more than halfway. That to me is where the rewards deeply, deeply come in. And we can then address some deep-seated issues, especially in Cancer, sometimes emotional issues, or again, matters of conditioning and things like this from our families. That sense of safety and security that's very necessary there as well. And we can look at that and any edges that are there, not just sweeping them under the rug, but actually trying to look at them, proactively looking at them during this time, just because it's a lot easier. It feels a lot more comfortable and safe when what you're dealing with is Jupiter. It can also be that much more rewarding, and you can make that much more progress basically through your efforts when you're dealing with Jupiter. There's also a strong association of Jupiter with expansion. It is, of course, the largest planet in our solar system, and it is strongly associated with travel. So personal expansion, the expansion of one's own horizons, either through physical travel or with culture here, through expanding our minds and expanding the range of our understanding and experience. One thing we should generally expect to see with Jupiter in Cancer is a flourishing of culture, and this being in many different places and very unique to place in Cancer. We do also have an association of Jupiter with wealth, but again, we do need to keep in consideration the fact that when it comes to matters of justice versus greed specifically, then Jupiter can get a little bit more complicated. So typically with Jupiter, and especially Jupiter in Cancer, it's not just wealth for the sake of wealth, it's wealth typically for the sake of well-being. So feeling like there's plenty. We also see a lot about wisdom with Jupiter. So matters of understanding and learning. It is something of an eternal student because it is typically quite fascinated with all of the different ways, all of the different perspectives, all of the different understandings of any given topic. Now, of course, in certain places, Jupiter can become pretty dogmatic and it can shut itself down to certain other ways of looking at things, and we will discuss that in a moment as well. But matters of meaning, belief, faith, personal purpose, these are all matters of a special significance to Jupiter. And we can see also how having a richness of meaning, belief, faith, purpose in one's own life can then lend itself to a sense of hope and a sense of justice and ethics and divine order in the world as well. How these things really feed into each other and really reinforce each other around this concept of the goodness of life, the goodness of people in Cancer. But ultimately, what Jupiter is working with is a very strong moral structure, and again, matters of justice and order. Especially through this period of time when it is engaging a lot with Saturn, that's going to be a really big thing, is this concept of law, justice, order. How is that playing out in any given nation? How is that playing out internationally? This is going to be a really big topic to be coming up around this time. And Jupiter and Saturn are going to be in conversation about that. The morality around how people are treated and individual rights and matters like this are going to be coming up a lot in the coming several years. There's also then with Jupiter a sense of generosity. So again, that sense of plenty, that wealth feeding into, okay, but it's not about greed, it's about well-being and sharing that well-being and the understanding that if there is well-being all around, then that is really reinforcing. And so what does it mean to have plenty if those around you don't? So wanting to share that wealth, wanting to be generous with that. And this can become a sense of like unchecked optimism, a sense that there always will be enough. And for Jupiter, absolutely, there will be. For Jupiter, absolutely, there is. Jupiter is very aware of the fact that it's very rare on Earth for there to not be plenty. You know, it's just a matter of distribution. And I think Jupiter's going to have a lot to say about that in the coming several years. So yeah, when it comes to then structure, law, coherence as well, this comprehensibility and coherence is also really important with Jupiter around understanding, because it really is wanting to get that big picture, that framework across to others. Jupiter is all about sharing, and that's how it can become a bit dogmatic at times too, is sharing whole cloth a grand narrative and expecting it to be then accepted whole cloth as well. But there are major legal themes and moral themes that come up with Jupiter. And that is the sense, that is the lens through which Jupiter sees that order playing out in the world. Are the rules, are the expectations, are the norms comprehensible? Are they clear? They need to be written out so that everyone can see them. That's one thing that is a major problem for, I think, all of us universally, culturally, is that any sort of concept of secret laws or secret rules or rules applying to certain people and not other people. So that kind of comprehensibility, that understandability of what the rules and regulations are. And also that they are coherent, that they're not reaching in one direction of a moral structure in some instances and then completely subverting that sense of order in others. Again, we're talking grand narratives, and that is usually the way that Jupiter is going to frame its understanding, is in this really big picture. Now, sometimes that can get a bit messy because, of course, sometimes we need to take things on a case-by-case basis. That is something that Jupiter in Cancer is actually quite good with, and that's part of the reason why Jupiter exalts in Cancer, is because it is able to look at things in a more nuanced way than Jupiter in Sagittarius or Pisces, where the planet is at home. And part of the reason also for this association of Jupiter with order is that this is what allows for growth. And this is what's so special about the relationship between Jupiter and Saturn as well, is that growth itself, unbound, is unsustainable, as we've learned economically in recent decades. But we can't just have this kind of exponential flying in all directions kind of growth. This needs to be guided. It needs to be directed. And so there is, with Jupiter, even though it's expansive, it does need some stability. It does need some sense of discipline and timing and patience. And there does tend to be an understanding with Jupiter about the fact that that's necessary. However, it does struggle in some places with adhering to that. So again, for instance, in Sagittarius, in Pisces, there can be this blindness to the reality of certain situations, the fact that we can't just dream an ideal into being and then run with it and expect also everyone else to run with it. Expect the rules basically to cohere and to confirm the dream, but rather than to, in Cancer, look at what is it that we're actually dealing with here on a day-to-day basis. What are people's needs? And how do we address that with Jupiter? So the confines, as it were, are already established in Cancer. That's part of the reason why Jupiter does so well here. Also, when we're dealing with Jupiter, we are dealing with the scholar, basically. So especially when it comes to concepts, big picture topics, so topics of humanities, these really broad-based, narrative-driven, framework-driven, conceptual topics where we can kind of endlessly tease out meaning. This is where Jupiter does best. There is also with Jupiter the teacher. So again, wanting to share what one understands and what one knows with others. And there's also then with Jupiter the visionary, this kind of priestly visionary that can see something that hasn't quite come into form, Saturn, yet, and yet can offer it up in a coherent way so that we can create something out of that. And so the fertile soil of Cancer really helps here to take these big ideas and to bring them down to earth and to plant those seeds to create something out of those. But we do have to keep in mind here as well that when we're dealing with Jupiter, the shadow side of that is the dogmatist, is the moralist, is the one that requires at times, again, in its shadow side, that others cohere to a grand narrative of one's own making, whether or not this is relevant. Now, as I've pointed out, Cancer will help with some of this, but there is a pretty specific way where this can actually get kind of out of hand with Cancer as well, so we'll talk about that too. And then, some of the other kind of shadow aspects of Jupiter, overconfidence. So too much of a good thing and thinking that the plenty will never run out. And that overconfidence also feeds into the grand narrative. There's this extreme confidence that everything will cohere to a narrative, and then a blindness to when matters of reality do not. And so this can wind up turning into a sense of arrogance, and we can even get this kind of an imperial attitude, or this pretension and assumption of ignorance on the part of those who don't cohere or who do simply have a different type of a worldview. And this is the imperialism aspect of this, can really be like the assumption of ignorance on the part of a different culture, where hopefully we can see where the ignorance is actually in that association of not being able to see the world through the view or through the lens of a different culture, and see how different values would look a little bit differently in different contexts. And the sense that one knows better for someone else. So this is where it can go to extremes. Jupiter absolutely can go to extremes. And I am definitely the type of astrologer where I will sometimes see Jupiter play both a protective function while simultaneously exacerbating a situation. I think we did really see that with COVID. The general concept around what COVID was represented by astrologically was Saturn and Pluto. And so those two coming together in Cancer, Jupiter then came through, and then Mars also wound up joining up right around when that whole outbreak happened. And I do think that we saw some of a protective quality of Jupiter in the mix there, but we also saw people going to extremes when it came to telling other people that they were crazy or that they were wrong, and that they needed to conform to one's own view of the broader situation. And we're still really living with a lot of the consequences of those extremes there. And certainly Saturn, Pluto can go to extremes on their own, but to have Jupiter come through here and add that moralism and that dogmatism to the mix, that was definitely Jupiter. So yeah, we can get that real unchecked optimism, that unchecked, just full-throated belief in a very rigid, specific thing with Jupiter. Now, of course, it's a little bit more natural to a Jupiter in Capricorn than a Jupiter in Cancer. But again, we're going to see how this can play out in a Cancerian way as well. This can play out in any given way. But just to come back to it, I'm recognizing now that I saved the whole shadow aspects of it for the end. And we are about to jump into Jupiter and Cancer, but this is a really lovely placement. And Jupiter, generally speaking, it's the greater benefic. It is a really wonderful and affirming archetype to be working with. It is, I think, for most astrologers, our favorite planet to be working with, of course. But for one thing, as a Jupiter in Gemini, I am personally inclined to pick apart Jupiter a little bit. So let's go ahead and dive into Jupiter and Cancer. We're just going to I have some like notes here. We're going to kind of run through it. I'm going to do a little bit of like running with some of the concepts in order to give certain examples and so forth. But off the bat, one of the major things that we have when we're dealing with any placement in Cancer is a sense of emotionality. This is the sign that is ruled by the moon. It's where Jupiter exalts. So this is really wonderful. And exaltation tends to be a place where the planet does not only well, but weirdly especially well, because of the fact that some of its worse qualities are actually accounted for while not squashing its wonderful qualities. So Jupiter in the Jupiter ruled signs of Sagittarius and Pisces, they tend to run with it. They tend to go really, really, really big. They tend to universalize. Again, there can be a bit of a dogmatism with both of them. And while those Jupiters behave typically really well, there can just be some edges around overdoing it in certain ways because there aren't any checks on it. Now, in Cancer, what we're dealing with is the checks of the moon. And what is that? The moon is reality, earthly reality. It is, to me, not only a lunar kind of an archetype of the moon, of course, but also a kind of Gaian archetype of this is a part of the earth that is orbiting the earth. It is around, it is completely involved in our affairs. The other planets, not so much. They're not constantly staring at earth. The moon is. And so it is deeply attuned to both the very real and physical aspects of earthly life, but then also all of the complications and even irrationalities that are the reality of human life, of life on Earth, beyond even humans. So there is both a physicality and an emotionality that gives a strong earthliness. And I don't just mean Earth as in land, but Earth as in a planet, this earthliness to Cancer, which keeps in check the universalizing, the cosmologizing, basically, of Sagittarius and Pisces. It gives some sense of boundary. Typically, what we're dealing with in Cancer is earth and imagination, the inner world and the outer world. And so what else I think is quite nice about this Jupiter in Cancer is that it can make a lot more real the benefits of Jupiter. So sometimes it can be a little bit hard for us to comprehend these thoroughly spiritualized or thoroughly universalized or thoroughly relativized benefits that come with Jupiter in Sagittarius or Pisces. It may well be the case that the entire universe is balanced in an ultimate sense, but that isn't necessarily what we're looking for when what we're dealing with is a mundane human concern. And so while this is a place of subjectivity, it is, again, earthly subjectivity. And so it is something that we can really personally comprehend on a broad basis, on a mass basis. And so we can absolutely see with Jupiter here, it's still doing its Jupiter thing. It's still very spiritualized. It's still highly focused on these concepts of morality and justice and order and so forth, but it's bringing it into the emotional and then the mundane spiritual development lines. So what Jupiter's working on improving here is not the sense of universal justice, but rather the sense of feeling spiritually and emotionally aligned, feeling able to experience the range of human emotion without judgment of self, to be able to develop into a sense of spiritual alignment that doesn't necessarily need to conform to, again, some grand scheme that has been set up by something else. There's an interesting way in which the Cancer Capricorn opposition archetypally deals with tradition. So Cancer's really only going to take on this concept of tradition insofar as it feels right. It's not for the sake of it. It's for the sense that one gets from the reassurance of being plugged into a shared reality. But it won't do that to the detriment of what feels right. So there's also then this sense of emotional wealth, connection, and safety that comes with Jupiter in Cancer, emotional security, emotional depth, and understanding of the complexity of emotion, and yet a greater understanding and cohesion of self and emotion and the subconscious and how these things wind up playing into each other, how conscious and subconscious emotions can wind up feeding into each other. And so tapping into that and tapping into the connection there, being willing to look at the shadow side of that in this kind of lunar sense of the shadows of night, the shadows that are cast upon the moon by the earth, and the fact that these things are temporary, they're temporal, and we do need to experience and understand to the best of our ability if we want to develop as well as we can emotionally and spiritually those fluctuations, and hopefully then find a sense of security amidst those fluctuations. There is also here with Jupiter and Cancer, with both of these, a sense of the inner child. And so we do have themes of conditioning, as I kind of alluded to earlier, where if we do have these considerations that we need to make around our conditioning, if there is a desire to reparent oneself, for instance, this can be really helpful along those lines. So if there's any sort of fear of abandonment or a need for healing around family patterns, emotions, belonging, internalization, boundaries, needs, security, this would be a really wonderful influence under which to do that, regardless of where it is in your chart. And hopefully to some extent, on a collective level, we can do this, especially around this concept of belonging. Because I do feel like that's something that we've gotten away from since Jupiter was in Capricorn. And no offense to Jupiter and Capricorn people, that was a special case. That was especially rough. And of course, I'm referring to 2020 there. But yeah, so with Jupiter in Cancer, a lot of the medicine there then is around love and care, nourishment, support, understanding, self-care as well, being willing to take some time out, being willing to go within and not only expand outwardly, universally, but to expand internally as well, and to experience some of that personal development, that personal expansion of one's own horizons within, to develop that space to be able to feel safe within oneself as well, and by oneself. Now, on the other hand, there can be a bit of a shadow side of the, puer eternus, the like kind of eternal child in this placement too, where there can be this kind of feigned helplessness, possibly believed on one's own part. So perhaps not consciously feigned, but there can be this overindulgence in need, on dependency on others, and expecting for others to fulfill certain needs of oneself. And this is, again, the shadow side, the less developed side of this that hopefully we won't fall into much. It's going to be there as a bit of a temptation here and there. But if we do see that coming up, try and turn that maybe into a bit of a self-parenting kind of a situation. Now, because Cancer can turn inward, it can withdraw, it can tend to try and protect itself, it can be quite defensive. We will see this as something playing out in the world. Yes, Jupiter is helpful, but it will expand on some of the shadow side of Cancer as well. And so we will see some of this, especially politically speaking. Isolationism, nativism, things like that. And what's interesting is that on the other side of that, like there is a bit of a dichotomy with Cancer where it does want to take care of others, and yet there is a bit of a fear of some others as well with Cancer. And so one other way that Jupiter could potentially go a little bit overboard here is when it comes to empathy and over-identification with an emotional attachment to something specific outside of oneself, such that it becomes a little bit controlling. And there can even be a little bit of emotional manipulation in this. And again, I'm sure that we're going to see some of this in, for instance, the media, in broadcasting with Jupiter here. So emotionally manipulative media would be Jupiter in Cancer, unfortunately. So I'm sure that we're going to see some more of that than we usually do. And sometimes that's for causes that we believe in. And so sometimes we can kind of get on board with that and we don't view it in that way. But again, I'm going to Jupiter and Gemini about this a little bit. It is always best to know what it is that you're working with, you know. If that's something that is being engaged with, if, for instance, we are playing on emotion, not necessarily viewing this as an emotional manipulation, but if there is a play on emotion, one should be very aware of the fact that they're engaging in that. And hopefully we can also be aware of when others are engaging in that with us too. But that is going to be a bit of a theme here. So yeah, we do also see matters of boundaries coming up. So again, another wonderful time to try to improve upon that. That's one thing that Jupiter is really wonderful with, is that if we're really willing to look at things in a very honest manner, it helps us immensely with improvement of whatever it's touching. And here it is dealing with boundaries. We also then have instincts and memory, the sense of the past that's baked into this placement. And this can be even an exaltation of the past, or the sense of idealization or romanticization of the past. So nostalgia. Sure that we're going to see a lot of nostalgia coming up with Jupiter in Cancer. But on a personal level, then again, that's something that if we tend to go into that place, or even if there are parts of the past or parts of our memory that we tend to try and look away from, again, this is making it a little bit safer and more rewarding to actually go into that place and look at that, deal with it. We also then have this matter of the bodily rhythms, and again, nourishment and fluctuation. And so again, if we have any wounds around that, this would be a really wonderful thing to work on throughout this year. And then what's really nice again about the spirituality of Cancer that we're dealing with here is that this is all very life affirming. So there's almost this kind of like, when I think of Jupiter and Cancer, I'm almost thinking of this kind of like nectar or like mana, basically, this life force that is deeply nourishing and supportive of the spirit and the emotion and the body. And so having that basically then in the ether with Jupiter and Cancer here, if you're wanting to kind of tap into that may be something that's really worthwhile to focus on, especially if you're trying to work on any sort of emotional or physical intuition, your instincts. This is also a very devotional sign when it comes to spirituality. So if you are wanting to deepen your practice in some way, this would also be a really wonderful time to do that. And yeah, again, like I said, one of my favorite things about this kind of an alignment is the sense of belonging. Now, sometimes this can go a little bit in-group, out-group. This can be a bit clannish with Cancer, sense of belonging to a specific group, or that does not belong in this group, or that they, worse, don't belong in this group. So again, it's going to play out differently in different types of people, shall we say. So on the one hand, there's likely to be an attempt by a lot of people to make others feel as though they do belong, to support that sense of belonging and community. And again, with the empathy, especially those that are unfairly excluded by others, and a sense of trying to correct for that. But then again, on other sides, then this can turn into a matter of nativism, or that you are not in our group. And that says something about you and our relationship to you. And so we can see how, of course, that if it goes to extremes can become quite dangerous. Now, on the other hand, again, there is this kind of down-to-earth quality to Cancer that can be really wonderful for Jupiter, which tends to go very big. It tends to go super wide. And so it can run into extremes of like dogmatism or relativism and things like that. This gives a much more, I hate to use the word practical, although it kind of is, a much more considered and mundane, use that word, approach to our conceptual frameworks. We do also often see with Cancer some association with the people, and that is specifically because this is the moon sign. And so this is also down to earth in the sense of being on the human level. So far less concerned with the like kind of lofty goals or whims of the few and most high status, but rather more so concerned with the well-being of masses. We also, of course, with Jupiter and Cancer are dealing with themes of home and family. So we can see potentially a lot of people moving. So the thing with Jupiter is it does have to do with travel. And so we could be seeing people move far away more often than usual, or like making a new home somewhere else. This is also a really wonderful influence for any sort of home affairs. Now, the one thing I will say is that this can wind up appraising high. So if that's something you want to avoid, maybe put that off until after next June. But when it comes to creating a very comfortable home for oneself or one's family, when it comes to the creation of family, this is also very fertile. When it comes to gardening, farming, things like this should play out pretty well for yields. And weirdly enough, like politically speaking, the outlook, we would think that we're in for a lot of corrections, at least in the US. And maybe that's part of the thing, is that from a US perspective, yeah, the housing market does seem to be beyond a peak at this point. But we are likely to see, like I said, with appraisals high, we are likely to see some sort of a growth in housing markets or housing values. And that may be more of a global thing, but we'll have to see. This is also going to lead for a lot of us to feel most safe at home or in our communities and the kind of tight-knit circles around us. So we may also find ourselves being a little bit more of homebodies, even while we're dealing with something of a nomadism with Jupiter in Cancer, of like searching, the search for home. We're having to expand one's horizons to find home or to create home. But yeah, we're also very likely with Jupiter in Cancer to see a lot of laws affecting housing matters, food matters, women, children, families, things like this. Fertility, land, water rights, matters of regulation around well-being and wholesomeness. So with this then also invoking families, again, we can see matters of like conscious and unconscious family patterns arising here to be improved upon. Matters of roots and origin, especially like origin narratives, or the way that we look at where it is that we come from and what that means about what it is that we're capable of achieving in this life, or where it is that we may find ourselves comfortable. And so on a personal level, again, we can work very well on those things during this time, but there may also be the sense of return to tradition or to family bonds or to this kind of sense of emotional reawakening, which is tied in then to our sense of where it is that we come from. And of course, we also then have the maternal archetype coming up here. And I have even heard of Cancer referred to in this way, of this kind of like matriarchal consciousness, kind of an attitude, as opposed to Capricorn, which can be a lot more patriarchal for one thing, and inclined toward capital and inclined toward hard numbers and things like this. Cancer can tend to subvert a lot of that because it just has a completely different value framework from which it is deriving meaning. And so there can be the kind of subversion of that economic framework from a familial or community-based framework that we may also see playing out in this year with Jupiter and Cancer too. And so another thing that I think is going to be interesting with this, the sense of community, and the fact that that sense of community did seem to break when we had Jupiter in Capricorn with Pluto and Saturn and Mars. But we do tend to attribute this kind of breaking of community that we've experienced recently with COVID, and with the fact that we were isolated for that time, and that link, that connection to community broke. And what's interesting about Cancer is that there's this concept of like reconnection, or connecting with the past, connecting with community, connecting with a sense of belonging that we once had. And so I really would not be surprised to see playing out around this time, especially now that we have, from the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that we also had around that time, now the square leading into the trine with Jupiter and Cancer during this time. If we're kind of recognizing where that separation, that breaking apart of community, leads to certain crises that now need to be solved through community, through a sense of community and reconnecting. So we may see some family or emotional bonds and connections come back together. So again, I kind of wonder, just looking at the past several years, if we do start to hear stories about families that were broken up by, again, the extremes that were taken during COVID, if we see some of that coming back together around this time, and not just about COVID, but it was around that time that it really seemed like everything just got kind of ripped apart in this irreconcilable way. Jupiter in Cancer would be the best chance that we have, especially given the crisis point and then the supportive point of Saturn to this as well, to kind of mend some of those relationships. So reconnecting to care for and support of each other. And we could see this really as, again, a cultural flourishing, a community flourishing around arts, markets, meetings, getting together and experiencing each other again. Community efforts are likely to be very supportive, quite rewarding. And there's likely to be this kind of reaffirmation of like the value of good times together, the renewal of community, possibly even through like food-related events or nightlife-related events as well. as well as this kind of consideration of care for children. And yeah, finally, when it comes to like belief and meaning and values with Jupiter and Cancer, this is really putting us much more in touch with ourselves and our own kind of value system and the subjectivity of this. Again, some people are just going to be incapable of understanding the subjectivity of their own views, and they will run with things and they will kind of continue to do the exclusionary kind of a thing. But recognizing again the subjectivity of our own experience and the fact that we are not fully capable of understanding why people come to certain conclusions, and that maybe some understanding around that, around at least the edges of that, can help people to bridge these gaps that seem so important to bridge during this time. As well as then coming back to what really matters. So there isn't really a rat race in Cancer. And that's one thing, again, it's that kind of subversion of Capricorn, where it's still a cardinal sign. It's still very initiatory. It is still this leader. A mother is really the ultimate leader, you know, but leadership through care, not command. And so we may see also a lot of people kind of reconnecting to not just the kind of survival instinct that has gotten way ramped up recently, or the kind of materialism that we've also seen become so exalted throughout the past several years, but coming back to that sense of care and of value of what really matters. As well as the kind of fluctuation, the cycles of matters, the fact that we do need to kind of come back around to different ways of doing things, because Cancer isn't the only way of doing things, but it does at least understand that there are cycles. And finally, now, there may also be a major emphasis on tides. Coasts could become a major issue, either an area of a lot of focus, especially with the square from Saturn. We may see some militarism around that or something, but too high of tides, we could see this would very likely strengthen hurricanes and water-related storms. Matters of too much water, problems of too much water can become a thing with Jupiter and Cancer, because again, it's too much of a good thing. But then also this concept of, again, there being plenty, and the fact that that plenty should then be shared, and that life should be affirmed, that life shouldn't need to be justified. And then again, on the other hand, this kind of, for some, this is going to be a fixation on borders, on nation, on nativism. And so there will be a bit of a push and pull when it comes to these different kinds of concepts of community and what that should mean. But bringing this back to a personal level, we do need to also keep in mind we are correcting for Gemini right now as we're moving into Cancer. And so while we have been all awash in information of all different types, these discrete packets of too much information, this overstimulation, this sensory overload related to the information and news that we're taking in, the communication and so on, that we've been dealing with over the course of this past year, where pretty much everyone that I talk to is like, I wish that I were tuning into the news less, and yet somehow I don't seem to be able to peel myself away from that. Jupiter and Cancer should help with that quite a bit by bringing us back to a sense of what is really around us and what is really real. So, of course, what's really real, I think a lot of us understand, is not so much what's going on in the media, but it is what's happening in our city, in our town, with our family, with our friends, with those that we really feel like support us and support our lives and our well-being. Not to mention the soothing of our own nerves, that withdrawal of Cancer. We could then really be withdrawing from and correcting for the overload of information that we've had. We do really need to soothe our nerves and reconnect with the earth with some calm and some peace during this time if we're going to make it through the coming several years, you know. But we also then are setting ourselves up really nicely, potentially for this Jupiter and Leo that we're going to have coming up next year. And to use a cliche, a Jupiter and Leo, that is really like a glow up personal kind of an energy there. It's very beautiful in its own right. And so during this time, to set ourselves up as well as we possibly can for showing up and shining out so strongly with Jupiter and Leo next year, this year, if we can focus on then being really internally secure and relationally strong so that we can show up and be really active next year and really be our best selves and to be able to show that to people. Finally, I do just want to say, of course, we need to be a little bit careful with electional charts and things like that, but this sets us up for a lot of really wonderful elections. Basically, one, the positioning of the moon is going to be bolstered, so we want to keep that in mind. Anytime that we have the moon in Pisces or Sagittarius, certainly. Anytime we have the moon here with Jupiter in Cancer, these are generally speaking going to be pretty decent times to start with matters, with things. And perhaps especially with moon in Pisces and Cancer. So these are periods of time to try and keep in mind. If you're thinking about starting something at a certain time, again, electional charts can be fickle. It matters what hour you do certain things, but you're probably going to get some better results if you pay attention to where the moon is. Because on the positive side of that, the moon is in a place that it's pretty comfortable, that seems pretty good for you as well. The fact that the moon has Jupiter in its home can really act as a boon to whatever the moon is doing anyway. So if there are certain signs for the moon to be in that you really love, then those should be improved. If there are certain signs for the moon to be in that you're not so fond of, those may also be alleviated to some extent. And honestly, on a subjective level, yes, Jupiter is going to make us more comfortable with the whole range of emotions, with which Cancer typically is also pretty comfortable with. And so, yes, if there is a sadness, yes, if there is a heartbreak, personal or empathetic, it may be especially strong. However, Jupiter does lean positive. It does lean optimistic. And so the baseline, basically, I think is going to be generally, maybe the baseline isn't, the median should be higher than usual. So our emotions should be more positive than typical, but do keep in mind that when those lows come, understanding that it's a cycle, understanding that it is just a moment in time and allowing that release of that emotion whenever it's ready to go, but also understanding then that the richness of emotion also in terms of joy or bliss should be that much higher as well. But yeah, I think that is most of what I want to say about Jupiter in Cancer on a general level. So we'll go ahead and take this through sign by sign. But since we typically then jump to our timestamps and then head out, I do just want to say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend this time with me. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up, I greatly appreciate that as well. It helps the video to spread around. And also, please do consider subscribing for future videos if you enjoyed this video. I would love to have you here. And thank you also so much to the members of this channel for their support. Angel Niblock, Michelle Howell, JJ, Deborah Keel-Leavitt, Gary A., Startlingly True, Patrick McKenney, Jody Z., Anne Marie, C. Rezer, Peace Out, Maria Serrell-Hyro, Rachel Windholtz, Lisa S., Aya, the Z-Man 1291, Long T. Standing, the Nelson Cat Maya, Maggie, Connie DiMartino, Dolly Giza, Mango GT, B Love, Cupid's Cut, Ellen McCormick Martins, Grace, Fluffy Cut, and Psyche Lloyd. Thank you so much for your support. Much love to you. And now, without further ado, feel free to check out the timestamps for your sign. All right, so for Aries, we have Jupiter in Cancer taking place in your 4th house of home and family. And so this is a pretty standard transit to have if you are expanding your family, If you are nesting or planning on having children, or someone around you of significance to you is having children, this can also be people moving in or changes with regard to your home and family. So even when it comes to specifically property, home, you could see some growth in value along those times, or be doing some major improvements around your home, whether that be major redecorating or renovations, upgrades. That is all likely to have a very positive impact on the value of your home, even if only your enjoyment of your space specifically. And sometimes value, when we're speaking of it in this kind of Jupiter and Cancer terms, are that emotional sense of value, not necessarily super focused on the financials. Also, when it comes to the emotional connections to your family members, to those around you, this can really deepen those connections, even if it's not your roots family or your ancestral family. This could be created family around you, partners, friends, those that you live with. So really deepening those bonds, deepening those community ties with those who are very close to you. You may even have opportunities to exchange physical, like, caretaking for people. This is also really wonderful if you are trying to deepen your sense of roots, or to look back at perhaps intergenerational trauma or family patterns, conditioning from youth, the conditioning of your parents and the impact that may have had on you personally. This makes it very safe for you to dig into that and really look at it and work through that in a very constructive way, such that it's very beneficial to you going forward. It can basically open you up then to even greater opportunity, because maybe there are certain patterns within your family that block certain opportunities. So if you're able to work through that, then this can help you in many, many different ways. You could be also feeling very maternal or paternal, or wanting to take care of something. So this could be expansion of the family. Even if you don't want to literally have children around this time, you may really feel called to adopt a pet, or to take care of someone and something, to provide to charity, or to otherwise just make sure that things are taken care of, that beings are taken care of, and wanting to contribute to that. So you could even find that it is somehow very significant to you to invest some of your time, effort, energy, resources of really any kind into community works around you, also to make sure perhaps it's people who are less fortunate within your community, that you're just really wanting to make sure that you're contributing what you can to helping to fill some of the gaps that they may have. You can also really develop through this time a sense of belonging from knowing who you are based on your roots. So if there isn't any reason to need to redefine yourself out of those roots, you could be redefining yourself into those roots, and what that kind of origin narrative, or that story that you tell yourself about your family and where you come from and what that means for you, basically. So finding then your sense of belonging within those roots, but then also in the world. You could also really just find yourself with this. The energy of it is that you're going to really enjoy being in your home, being with those that are close to you, taking really good care of yourself, especially, again, deeply your physical body, your soul, and feeling very comfortable in that, and not feeling the need to cut any corners when it comes to nourishing yourself and giving yourself what you truly instinctively want and desire. This could be something as straightforward as buying a new bed. When we look at the chart as a wheel, this is the period of time typically where we are sleeping. So it may come through quite literally of wanting a much more comfortable bed so that you can sleep better and feel better in your body from that. This can also, if you're a parent, be something of an improvement of your relationships with your children, or some things that are going really well for them that you're also very excited about since it's showing up in your chart. Now, this for you is going to be a 2-year process. If you have children, I'm sure that this Jupiter will be speaking to your connection with them this year and then also next year as Jupiter moves into Leo, which is your 5th house of children. So if you've been wondering how to or when to or whether to deepen those ties or to offer some extra care, consideration, making your children feel very safe to be themselves. I know sometimes we can get really wrapped up in our lives and wrapped up in the kind of pushing away of each other that we can tend to do, and children especially as they're trying to individuate and everything. But if you are wanting to either mend something or just make sure that they know that they're safe and that they can come to you, this would be a really wonderful time for you to be able to do that. Now, with Jupiter in Cancer, that could be a little bit smothering, but I would just recommend it anyway. Jupiter tends to go over quite well, but maybe try not to lay it on quite as thick as you would like if it seems to be very overwhelming of a feeling for you. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aries. I hope that this is absolutely wonderful transit for you. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Taurus rising, we have Jupiter in Cancer in your 3rd house of community, the people, places, things around you, communication, learning. So this should be a really wonderful time for learning anything that it is that you are wanting to. Digging into different topics that really speak to your heart especially. You should find it really easy to connect with the material that you're trying to learn or any books that you are reading, really feeling right and connected with the material. You may also have a real sense of comfort and pride that you are taking during this time in expanding your mind, in expanding your knowledge and understanding of either people around you or a different language, a new topic, things like this, technologies, possibly helping others to understand certain technologies as well, as there's a bit of a caretaking or a sharing aspect to this too. You may even find yourself connecting with communities online that feel very surprisingly nurturing, maybe of a type that you haven't quite encountered online for a little while, but also in your community. So the people around you, siblings, peers, neighbors, those that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, this can have those interactions going a lot better than expected. So especially given the retrograde of Mars through this area earlier in the year, if things have felt a little bit contentious or just not very satisfactory with how people are approaching you basically, or treating you, or that you're getting a lot more no's recently, that should 180 in a very noticeable way where people are just treating you with a lot more respect. And so then those connections are able to develop a lot more organically. I would also really recommend engaging in communicative endeavors. So whether it be connecting with certain communities, be they online, be they local, but writing, generally speaking, especially if you are a writer, this should be a really wonderful, prolific time where hopefully you shouldn't run into very many creative blocks, especially when Jupiter is direct here. It will go retrograde for several months, but as long as it's direct, at least it should be really flowing. If you're not necessarily a writer for other people, journaling, I would also really recommend taking down your thoughts, paying attention to the thoughts that come into your mind, possibly even dreams and so forth. So your communication with spirit, so to say, and ultimately feeling really connected and emotionally drawn into stories. So you may find yourself as well engaging with either entertainment media is kind of what I was thinking, but even when it comes to, say, journalistic media or the stories that you hear of people in different places, if they're struggling with something, you may feel really touched by that and want to then help to take care of people. And this may well be, especially with the community around you, because this is going to have you really wanting to nurture those in your city, usually. And you should also be able to find a lot of support and care and comfort from your environs and the people around you. Even if you have lawns or gardens around you, you may also want to put a lot of time and care and attention into those. Also, if you are a teacher, this should be really helpful for you to connect with students and to have your lessons come through very comprehensively to your students. This could even indicate something of a promotion for people who are teachers or communicators. And yet, any effort that you can put into your communication skills, so this could be active listening, this could be communicating with intention. And like I said, this doesn't just have to be with human beings. This could be with spirit. So intuitive listening, connecting with your own intuition and understanding how you are able to communicate with forces beyond what we see. And yeah, I would also recommend traveling, whether it be local. Usually the third house is going to be local. You could be moving locally, but even if this is farther away, I personally find that for me, though, I mean, I have a lot of like Mercury and Jupiter stuff as it is, but I do tend to find that the third house for me does also speak to really far away moves and really far away travel. So definitely don't feel the need to have to confine your travel closer if you don't want to. But I would highly recommend traveling, again, even if it's just a day trip. That should give you the ability to reconnect with yourself, to reconnect with your spirit, your soul. You're likely also, wherever you go, to me, where you are is third house. And perhaps that's also part of the reason why some transits to this area can really speak to going far away, because suddenly then there's something that's really important and new and novel about the things that are around you because you're somewhere completely different. But to have Jupiter in this place and to have it in Cancer, it should be the case that you're able to really benefit from, in a plethora of different ways, that which is around you. So the extent to which you can vary what it is that's around you even, and utilize travel as a way to engage in that, to change what it is that's around you, and then benefit also from that. I would, again, just highly recommend it. It should feel very fulfilling. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Taurus rising. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Gemini rising, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your second house of security. And so this can speak to both emotional and material security. For Gemini rising, that probably flows together, considering you have Cancer in your second house, where these two forms of security wind up bleeding together. And so with emotional security directly tied to financial and material well-being, this is very supportive of that. So this offers a great deal of growth along those lines. So reinforcing one, naturally bolstering the other. Typically, Jupiter transiting through the second house, generally speaking, is very helpful financially. So there can be either new streams of income a diversification and growth of income through new sources, additional sources, or it can bolster your income from a specific source that you already have or investments that you've made. This can even speak to property and real estate with Cancer. And so opportunities wind up presenting themselves throughout this time to build up your financial nest egg. And you should feel increasingly secure throughout this year when it comes to being able to nurture and nourish yourself, to take care of your needs and to feel that those are being met. And where it is that you may often feel that there's some lack, this is offering opportunities basically to fill those gaps, regardless of whether or not they're real or not with Cancer here. Now, this can be really literal in the way that I have here of opportunities to build wealth through specifically Cancerian avenues, through caretaking or through food-related careers, through, again, real estate-related careers, through nurturing or guiding people. And there is an interesting flow with Cancer as well, where you can kind of feed into that inflow, outflow through offering kindness and support and care to others, and then ensuring that that flow between you and others can carry on throughout this time. So basically, that which you put out, receiving that back and creating that really nice flow. Honestly, you're probably going to get back even more than you wind up putting out throughout this time. That's often how Jupiter goes. So yeah, that generosity flow, creating that would definitely be very well advised. But again, do try your best to be mindful of overgiving or emotional spending, but perhaps especially during this time, overgiving. That can also be something that Gemini rising tends to do, is feeling responsible for the well-being of pretty much anyone else that they encounter. Definitely give, but don't cut yourself short by overgiving to others. Also, when it comes to your emotional reserves, your emotional resources, so making sure that you do have some boundaries when it comes to filling and fueling others to the detriment, not just the expense, but the actual detriment of your own reserves. So do try to keep an eye open for that, because this will have you just really, really generous. And yeah, generally speaking, when it comes to, I wouldn't just say big purchases, because little things can wind up adding up too. So checking in, maybe if you're ever on Amazon or one of these places where typically we're buying things that aren't like food and so forth, just kind of check in and ask yourself if something is really going to, as an item that you have like a month or two down the line, make you happy, or if it is the emotional boost that we can get from purchasing things that you're seeking in the short term. Just checking in here and there. You may even want to have some expenditure on some kind of well-being or nourishment kind of a thing. So in retreats or spas or upgrading your diet, you should be able to really benefit from those kinds of investments throughout this time. And really, most investments that you make during this time should be able to develop really well. But again, money's important, and it's important to have money and not overspend it. So I do just always preach a little bit of caution, because there can be some overconfidence when it comes to Jupiter too, or just going a little bit overboard. But I would definitely recommend making some kind of an investment during this time, even if you're really, really lowballing yourself on what it is that you're able to afford. And yeah, so when it comes to your own like emotional, internal security, again, this should be really helpful for that, for bolstering that. Also for working on that. That's one thing that I think we tend to assume that Jupiter is just going to, out of thin air, create opportunities for us and do things for us. But what I find is best as a way of looking at Jupiter is that it offers us the opportunity to improve something and have results then from that action, from that effort that exceed what we typically would get out of it. So any insecurities that you may have about yourself, about anything, about your body, about how you show up, about what people think of you, about your values, about your views of things, about what's important to you, about your priorities. This would be a very safe time and a very comfortable time to dig that up, look at it during this time, because there's really not going to be a better time than when Jupiter is in this place, exalted, and really supporting any effort that you make in that direction. And other than that, I think I would just say, in addition to things like income, there can be a little bit of a windfall energy to this. So it doesn't necessarily have to be money from your own efforts or your own investments or things that you've done, but you may just come into money through some other means, settlements or inheritances and things like this. Money has a tendency to find its way to you when you have Jupiter going through your second. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I wanted to say for Gemini. So I hope that this transit is very profitable for you, let me put it that way, and really bolsters your sense of security. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer is going to be running through your first house, which is very, very lovely. This is not only a Jupiter exalted transit for you, but it's also running through your house of you and the way that you want to show up, the way that you want to experience your life, especially on a day-to-day level and on a very personal level. And so this is a period of time where there's abundant opportunity for personal growth, personal improvement, personal development, expansion, and for feeling really good and solid in yourself. So you should be provided with all sorts of evidence of what it is that makes you excellent. And again, opportunities to then even expand upon that, especially when it comes to emotional security for yourself. This is super helpful. So your own natural nurturing sensibility is really brought out by this transit as well. So you being really seen as a source of nourishment and nurturing and support for others, and having that really valued and respected for what it is, having the emotional labor that you naturally do for people to actually be appreciated and reciprocated, and having a lot more than of a well to draw from in order to support others. So feeling a lot less drained by that practice of just taking care of people, as well as taking care of yourself and your own sense of feeling connected with the world, of belonging in the world, your own sense of connection to humanity, to those around you, to the earth itself, really, as well as to your inner child. So hopefully also throughout this time, you're able to experience a lot more of the lighthearted nature of Cancer, especially being a Cancer in this world that tends to be very focused on quantitative, material kinds of achievements, and feeling naturally like there's so much more to life than that. I'm hoping also that you're able to really enjoy the opportunity that this can offer to you to look at that depth of yours, the complexity of yours, the kind of wonderful messiness of life, not to mention your own creative nature. I would say if you are remotely a creative type, I would really encourage that you engage that throughout this time, because it should, again, enable you to, considering, again, the world that we live in and the fact that there always seems to be something to chase, but rather during this time to be able to engage in your own creativity in a way that just feels right, that you enjoy just for the sake of enjoying it, just for the sake of the enjoyment of expressing yourself and your spirit. If you're not yet perceiving of yourself, at least as a creative type, to be perfectly honest, as a Cancer, it's likely that that is a latent talent then that you have. And it would be really wonderful if there's anything that kind of draws on you throughout this time to really follow that thread and develop that side of yourself. And of course, this doesn't have to be in any sort of a traditional way. This is a first house transit. You definitely make of it what is meant for you at this time, but also what you want from it. So if creativity for you means creating a really wonderful and nurturing environment around yourself, if it's creating food that makes you feel really wonderful, if it is creating wonderful connections between different people, whatever that means to you, this should be a period of time where you feel like that is easier to achieve and more satisfying, as well as even more rewarding than usual too. So yeah, in terms of emotional coherence and understanding your own intuitive, instinctive nature throughout this time, and really feeding into and feeling into that, connecting really deeply from that, that should really support your sense of confidence in yourself. Additionally, when it comes to anything parenting related, this is a really wonderful transit for you. So when it comes to your connection with your family, your children, when it comes to your ability to embody the role of the type of parent that you would like to be, if you are possibly then coming into even just the sense of, this is a role that I would like to take on at some time. This could even have you feeling an abundance of that kind of maternal or paternal energy. And if you're not in a position right now where you want to have a human child, you may find yourself, for instance, adopting a pet or something like this. So your own nurturing nature is going to be super strong during this time. And so you may wind up then taking on a role that enables you to express that, even if it's not specifically through your own biological children. Yeah, again, this is just a really wonderful time for you to feel very comfortable with yourself, to feel like you're able to grow and to develop and thrive where it is that you are. And the things that you initiate during this time, since this is a cardinal sign and it resonates so much with you, the things that you start during this time too are likely to take on a really wonderful life of their own, which is also long-term very supportive of you and something that you can take an immense amount of pride in. Because again, this is the area of our charts that indicates how it is that we want to show up. So the seeds that you're planting right now should really have baked into what it is that they're representing, something that you strongly identify with in the most wonderful way. I mean, generally speaking, Jupiter going through the first house is really strongly associated with what we term now as a major glow up. And this really is a time to focus on what is it that you're wanting for yourself? How is it that you are wanting to show up? How is it that you're wanting to see yourself or perceive of yourself in the world? There should be basically endless opportunity throughout this time for you to come into that more and more and more throughout this year. And yeah, other general Jupiter in the first house things, not just all of these kinds of personal development kinds of opportunities, but typically things that you want just kind of wind up coming through for you as well, for you to take hold of and run with. people approach you quite well. Typically, people think quite highly of you, much more so than usual. Things tend to be easier to accomplish than usual. And additionally, if you've had any trouble with knowing who is it that I am, who is it that I want to be, especially if you've had any sort of things going on with relationships where maybe you have kind of defined yourself based on what you think that other people expect from you, or being the other half of someone else. If you've carried yourself any residues of family expectations, of conditioning, of looking at yourself through the lens of someone else and their expectations of you, ultimately what this transit is encouraging is coming back to yourself and really prioritizing to the utmost yourself and making sure that you are increasingly clear. And again, if you're not quite yet, that's totally fine. That's what this transit really helps with, is coming into a greater sense of, I'm standing in my own self, in my own truth, you know, in the light of my own affection and care for myself and respect for myself, and not really needing to then make excuses for that or to justify that to other people. It's so not about that. What it's really about is, in every sense of the word, caring for yourself, and quite grandly with Jupiter's involvement. So yeah, I mean, this is such a wonderful transit. I hope that you're able to really get the most out of it. There might really feel like there's a lot going on, that there's a lot of people kind of pulling on your energy. And it may feel a little bit overwhelming, of feeling like there's a lot of different opportunities that are available to you that seem really excellent and that you're wanting to take advantage of, but there's only 24 hours in the day. So in those moments, if there's any sort of overwhelm, just really remind yourself that this transit is ultimately about caring for yourself in all senses of the term. And yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Cancer. So I hope it is absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Leo rising, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 12th house of your subconscious, of spirituality, of your connection to liminal energies, that which is beyond what we can see, beyond what we can control. And so this is really going to be working for you at the soul level. It's very likely that you're going to have a lot of very rich dreams, which could be very constructive for you too, if you are able to look into them, dig into them, write them down, consider them. I would definitely recommend having a dream journal for this upcoming year, as well as to really develop and, in a sense, improve upon a very rich inner life. So your imagination, your creativity, your sense of connection to the muse, and your sense of inspiration from beyond. And with Cancer being here for you, for one thing, you may just kind of naturally feel connected to ancestry. But you may also, during this time, feel especially connected that way, almost guided, or like there is something from beyond which is really supporting you. One thing I really love about transiting Jupiter through the 12th house is it can feel incredibly protective, to where even if something seems to go a little bit sideways, it can feel like, and then in the last moment, it just seemed to work out really well for me. It can kind of feel like then having a guardian angel on your side, basically watching out for you. And you may even, again, with Cancer here, identify that as an ancestor. And so then also really being able to work on any sort of subconscious patterns around your family, around your ancestry. If there's any sort of intergenerational trauma, if there's any family patterns that you are hoping in this life to break. Even if there are certain things that you know about your family history that maybe you don't want to cut ties on, but would rather do some kind of service of trying to work through that on behalf of an ancestor. This should be a very safe time and a much more comfortable time for you to do all of that kind of work to address any sense of fear of abandonment or a fear around safety. Going into that during this time should feel very safe and much less just straightforwardly triggering, basically, because it should feel like you have a great deal of support in accomplishing that kind of personal or ancestral development. Also, any sort of conditioning or things that you picked up in your childhood that you would like to work through, this would be a really wonderful time to do that, possibly journaling around it. But however works for you, if it's a creative thing, if it's just thinking it through and processing it, it should feel very emotionally relieving to put a little bit more time and effort and energy into working through those things. You may also find that you really enjoy your alone time through this time. So the 12th house is a place of quote unquote isolation, but it can also be a place of really wonderful introspection and even introversion. So with Leo prominent in your chart, I would assume that you at least have a part of you that is extroverted. You may find that a little bit less loud throughout this time and really enjoy taking care of yourself on your own and taking time to rest, taking time to refuel, to replenish yourself, basically emotionally, spiritually, even physically too. Getting your energy levels, maybe not like higher, but more robust, basically. Filling your own well throughout this time. This is also a place of empathy and service. And so you may feel very drawn to support people as well. And this may not be such a hands-on thing. It may be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But just knowing that you are kind of contributing in some way to alleviating the suffering or difficulty of other people, especially people that you have a sense that they're not fully in control of their situation, with the 12th house highlighted here. You may feel very drawn to, again, just try and alleviate that basically in some way or another. And it may be through counseling people on some level too, just being able to hear people out, being able to understand the difficulties of life and basically offer a shoulder or an ear to the people around you. But yeah, really any sort of spiritual or creative endeavors that you already have, and possibly you're already adept with this. This would really be then the muse stepping in and helping immensely with this kind of spiritualized inspiration, basically. Or making it feel safer to express deeper and deeper parts of yourself, even potentially pain that you have that sometimes is a little bit difficult to work with. You should be able to channel that very productively and much more comfortably through this time. But if that isn't something that, say, you already really identify with, this can really help you to develop those skills. Also, if you've been wanting to work on your intuition, on connecting more or developing more spiritually, possibly even tapping into psychic modalities or divination, even astrology, things like that, that can tap you into areas beyond the reach of the five senses of perception, basically. This should be super helpful to tapping you right into that. And you may feel it, you may develop this, at least at first, in what we would call like your emotional body. So your senses, your feelings emotionally, but also the way that your feelings and your physical senses do wind up intertwining. So you may tap into it on the bodily level, even though it's something that's very intuitive that's working through you. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Leo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Virgo rising, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 11th house of friendships, benefactors, hopes, dreams, aspirations. So this is a really wonderful place to have Jupiter transit, especially when it's exalted. Generally speaking, it means that there are people in your friend group that consider themselves allies to you, that are willing to support you in your dreams, in your hopes and aspirations, and are able and willing to give you a leg up, usually professionally, but generally speaking, in any way that represents a fulfillment of a goal. So getting a major leg up here, which is really wonderful. But this also then enriches the emotional connection that you have with your friends and with those around you, possibly even with social groups that you belong to. You may even feel drawn to get more involved with different groups. And I would definitely advise that with Jupiter in this house. That can be both very fulfilling then and very beneficial to you as well. You may also want to get involved in some community aid groups or community care kind of situations. So collective efforts toward ameliorating some needs or addressing some concerns within your community or your environment. And basically making sure that the society around you, that you're able to contribute to taking care of that, to improving upon that. Additionally, if you should need help throughout this year, it should also be quite available to you from those around you, very willing to help you out. So I would also definitely recommend, if you know that someone is able to help you in some way, to not be too shy about asking, because it's much more likely with Jupiter here that you're going to get a positive response. Also, your goals and dreams and so forth, those are also really bolstered throughout this time. So for sure, in terms of opportunities and the ability of people to help you to achieve certain things, but even just opportunities to engage with things in a more nurturing way, in a more satisfying and fulfilling way, and then being driven to really double down on that in the future. This is a very future-oriented, aspirational house here. So focusing in on what it is that you really want to create for yourself in your life, the relationships that you're wanting to have around you, the role that you're wanting to take on in the world. And so that is all really bolstered here. And again, not just in the sense of having new dreams and aspirations and being able to dream bigger, but also in matching up with and aligning with opportunities in order to see that through. So yeah, the groups that you're involved with, your friendships and so forth, there's likely also a proliferation of that during this time. So like I said, definitely getting involved in new groups and so forth, but you may find yourself with more friends hitting you up, wanting to do things. You may just meet quite a few new people that you consider to be friends throughout this time too. And especially those that are very supportive of you and connections that feel emotionally open. And some of that may even represent a reconnection with the past, or a reconnection with a group or a goal, revisiting something, going back and doing something again that you really loved, but maybe you fell out of. There's a lot of memory and past energy that tends to be bound up with Cancer as well. So you may actually wind up hearing from quite a few people that you haven't heard from in some time. And I would be pretty open to that kind of thing throughout this time, just because they're showing up as a Jupiter transit. And so it is more likely that that should be a positive reconnection. And yeah, this also helps immensely with leadership positions and being seen as a leader or a very like considerate and caring authority figure within groups. And so because you're giving off that energy throughout this year, that can then lead to those leadership opportunities opening up for you as well. And if you already are a leader, this should be a period of time where that should be going over really well, where it should be easy for you to motivate people, for you to motivate yourself, for you to get people to work together really productively as a team too. Also, just generally speaking, Jupiter can definitely speak to wealth, especially when we're dealing with succedent houses, so the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th. And the wealth that we can see with the 11th house, certainly it's a sense of emotional or social wealth of having a lot of connections like that, but it can also be a way of connecting with resources through friends and through groups. So that's another reason why I would definitely recommend engaging with people a lot, is you can build some really wonderful projects with people that have a lot of longevity and fulfillment. And if there is some kind of a profit motive involved in that too, if you want to maybe set up even an independent business or something with people, if you want to go into partnership with friends, this would be a really wonderful transit to initiate that under. Or if you already have some kind of a project or initiative or venture or something like that, this should be a period of time where it does super well and where you can kind of get it to the next level. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I would definitely recommend socializing as much as you can throughout this time, because there's just going to be an abundance of opportunities when you are engaging with others in a friendly manner. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Virgo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. Jupiter loves to be in this house. It is the greater benefic, and this is the house of beneficiaries. So I hope it treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Libra, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 10th house of your reputation, legacy, your public-facing role, your occupation, and what it is that you are known for in the world. And so this is really, really wonderful, a potent, very beneficial transit for your career. Typically, this is associated with promotions, stepping up the ladder. If you are independent, getting more clients, showing up super well, getting attention, so people taking notice of you, basically, and your profile raising. And so, yeah, your public image is expanding. And the fact that you have Cancer in this place in your chart kind of indicates that your public image is somehow tied into a sense of nurturing or care or emotional intelligence. And this is really feeding into that. So hopefully you're able to double down on what it is that you're known for, rather than necessarily trying to like juice this transit for what it's worth and trying to take on a different image. If it doesn't quite feel right, that's not so much what Jupiter's going to be working on here. It's more so going to be bolstering what's really organic to you and how it is that you're basically supposed to show up in the world, which is, of course, as yourself. So yeah, these career shifts can be more nurturing or more community focused, more like on a soul level fulfilling, more meaningful to you. So for instance, one of the like stereotypical careers for Cancer 10th house is associated with like real estate or homes, things like that. So this would be along the lines of your profile being raised because you are viewed as someone who genuinely cares what clients are looking for their families, and then possibly gaining more clients through word of mouth, and then gaining a greater sense of satisfaction from your work because you know that you're genuinely helping people in their lives through your work. But yeah, we could definitely see a doubling down of any sort of Cancerian themes with your working life that could be interwoven into that heightening of your profile. So again, that having to do with home, family, coming off as very maternal, nourishing, warm, considerate, not cutthroat, not just calculating, but bringing your soul and your heart basically into your work. And yeah, so similarly, if you're in a leadership role or you are either vying for a leadership role or would just like to come into something like that in your career, again, I would highly recommend doubling down on the fact that you're able to lead with consideration for others. So not just coming across as a calculating ladder climber, but rather coming across as someone who can handle people. Basically someone who is a people person as a leader, and that's your leadership style. Now, again, if you're already in a leadership role, then this should be very beneficial to you in being able to motivate people, being able to do productive work with other people, to lead by example, and to have the respect of those who are recognizing your authority. Again, like I mentioned, major potential for success in real estate, wellness, food, childcare. Now, this is always the case for you. However, a Jupiter in Cancer in the 10th house transit is going to double down on that, and it's going to help it out a lot. So if these are areas that you are drawn to, one, it would not be super surprising, but two, this would be a really wonderful time. Even if it's a matter of starting training, I would do it because this would be a really fortunate transit under which to initiate something like that. Additionally, when it comes to your career and your home life, one thing is also with Cancer in the 10th, sometimes we can see homemakers, people who are involved in the community, but they might not have a standard kind of like capitalism oriented type of business career, but they might be known for caretaking, whether it be within or outside of the family. And so again, you're really respected for that throughout this time. And if you are in a career and you have some family needs at home, or even your work-life balance has just been out of balance even for you, say if you're single and it's mostly you that you need to take care of, even the need for that is going to be a little bit more visible, and it's going to be more acceptable or reasonable to others. So Jupiter tends to come across as something that, again, should be respected, should be taken into consideration. And so if you feel like, again, that's been out of balance, or that it's something that you haven't been able to make quite clear the level of priority that you would much rather give to that more private area of your life, it should go over well during this time to seek that out and to make that priority much more clear. Now, on the other hand, and part of the reason why that is so important, this can have you quite busy in your working life. Again, if you are stepping up in some way, if you're getting more clients, this can have you quite busy in that area of your life. So do just try and keep in mind that you could wind up feeling pulled in two directions here. So definitely try to make time to take care of yourself and or your family as well. This can even have it become quite clear to you if there's a pivot that you're wanting to make professionally. This can make it really quite abundantly clear as to which direction it is that you're really desiring to go. So also, if that's been up in the air, this should make that kind of a transition very easy as well. And it can, of course, then present opportunities along that way. But yeah, this is such a wonderful transit to have. So I really hope that it treats you well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Scorpio, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your ninth house of worldview, higher education, travel. To me, this is also the place where humanities type topics show up, as well as a huge amount of our personal improvement, development, and expansion. This is the place where we expand our horizons. And so to have Jupiter here is really lovely. It really expands your horizons when it comes to your philosophical, your spiritual beliefs, and gets you much more in touch with your own kind of intuitive connection to your sense of belonging when it comes to your beliefs. So where is it that you fit into the world? What is it that truly resonates for you on a personal level? What is it that you would truly like to see of the world? And are there any ways that you're able to tap into that more and more throughout this year in order to feel more emotionally fulfilled? You're also likely through this time to find yourself drawn to dig into topics more, so to learn more and to get really into certain subjects. So you may wind up taking a course. I would actually highly recommend that if you feel pulled to do something like that. There may be some vacation or travel experience or moving overseas, for instance. Cancer in the ninth house can definitely, especially with Jupiter coming through that area, that can definitely indicate finding one's home overseas. And it can even speak to your ancestral home overseas. If, for instance, you live in a place other than where you consider your ancestors to, quote, be from. And you may even have an opportunity then to kind of follow that path, to go back to that place. And you may feel very drawn to do so as well. Yeah, generally speaking, when it comes to travel or feeling really pulled to a specific place, and it doesn't have to be a place that you feel connected to, like typically, it may just be a place that you feel drawn to during this time. And if you're able to take a trip like that, or to even learn about, because again, this is the ninth house, even if you are learning about a specific place, a specific culture, or a religion that isn't usual to have around you, I would follow your intuition on that. Really follow that thread, because it's likely that there's something very, very beneficial to you in following that. This can even take on themes of a sense of pilgrimage. And again, like, even if it's not physical travel, if you're just immersing yourself in a specific culture or a specific spiritual tradition, or again, if you are tapping into what feels intuitively right to you spiritually, it doesn't have to be a tradition that already exists, though Cancer does tend to look backward toward a tradition for answers. But even if you are really, really personalizing this, which Cancer can also do quite well, and you're just like going through different books, or it doesn't have to be specific books, if it's different YouTube videos or documentaries, or again, even if you're taking like a comparative religion class or something, and you're just taking bits and pieces of what feels right, what resonates with you. And this doesn't just have to be spiritual either. This is a place of philosophy. And so we can see political philosophy, ideology, things like this, even philosophies of ethics, or even philosophies of like behavior, things like this, where there's a theoretical basis. That's usually what the ninth house winds up digging into. So you may wind up even finding yourself engaging in teaching or sharing and publishing what you have learned throughout your life, what your life has taught you. I would definitely recommend, if you are remotely interested in publishing your own writing or your own ideas, It doesn't just have to be text that you would be publishing either. This could be a YouTube thing or a podcast that you would want to start. If that's something that has been of some interest to you, but you've been wondering whether or when you should get started on it, this would be a really wonderful time to get started on something like that, or to, if you are already writing a book, to publish a book, or to start writing a book that you intend to publish. Basically, this is the place where you disseminate what you've learned. You disseminate your ideas to others. And to have an exalted Jupiter transiting through this place is very helpful to that end. And then, even more broadly speaking, this about the kind of global connection and growth through your global connection. Cancer really is, it's ruled by the moon. And to me, the moon speaks, of course, not only to this kind of lunar archetype, but also this kind of Mother Earth archetype. It is, as far as we know, a piece of the earth. And it speaks to mundane concerns, so earthly human concerns and the global family, the human family, basically. And so you may feel this kind of pull of some sort toward engaging with that connection. This could even be some kind of an overseas charity. It doesn't have to be overseas, but just like, again, that kind of broader human family consideration and wanting to take care of that and wanting to nurture that. Also wanting for people around you to feel like they belong, especially people who may feel like somehow they don't. Again, any kind of efforts that you can engage in that enable you to feel very fulfilled about taking care of people as a global community where everyone should feel like they belong, because everyone literally does belong, and that everyone should feel taken care of. To whatever extent that you feel drawn to engage in that kind of effort, I would definitely recommend it around this time. Because again, it's likely to feel very fulfilling. You may even wind up meeting through processes like that some really wonderful people that you connect with. You may even find your own sense of belonging through engaging in some kind of effort like that too. But yeah, ultimately, this is going to be a period of time of immense growth and personal expansion in such a way that should make you feel quite emotionally satisfied as well. So any kind of intuitive nudges that you get to develop yourself or your knowledge or your experience throughout this time, I would really follow those threads, because that's going to be really represented by that Jupiter transit. And it should be a really wonderful experience then. Also, if you are someone who is maybe afraid of flying or something like this, you may find that that is not as much of a problem this time. This should protect pretty well with travel. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 8th house of shared resources, dependencies, vulnerabilities, your ties and connections with other people, contracts, inheritances. So one thing to keep in mind off the bat with this is to be very mindful about which kinds of debts that you take on around this time. There is the potential to have some very constructive debts, but there is also always the possibility of going a little bit overboard or finding yourself much more so, because of the fact that Jupiter grows things, much more so in debt than you would expect from something. So just keeping in mind, especially if you are planning on taking out a loan or something like this during this period of time, it would just be very wise to make sure that you're thinking that through and that you're not doing that too quickly or over optimistically. So with that out of the way, going into this more. So your entanglements with other people, your interdependencies, both emotional and financial, can really deepen and grow during this time. So you may feel much more capable or trusting of intimacy. It's very likely that that theme around vulnerability and intimacy and interdependency is going to become much more apparent during this year. If you are partnered with another, so if you are married or you are in a business partnership with someone, the connection there or the other side of that can really develop a lot of profit. So to put it in concrete terms, this could be a partner getting a raise or a partnership that you have being more profitable. So again, if you're in a business partnership with someone, this could be getting more clients or getting higher value contracts together. Also, if you are working in the financial industry, if any part of your work winds up intersecting with other people's money, this is really helpful pretty much across the board when it comes to your working life, especially financially. So one way we could see that happening would be a financial advisor really hitting the nail on the head this year, and therefore, again, getting a lot more from that contract or from that client or through word of mouth. There could also definitely be some matters of property coming up around this time. So again, this can be inherited property. Basically, we have family home themes with Cancer in your 8th house as it is, but we also then have Jupiter running through that area. So it could be a period of time where the value of things is assessed high. So if that's something you want, that's great. If that's something you don't want, maybe think that through. But certainly one of the standard ways that this can come through is just indicating receiving some kind of a settlement or an inheritance. There can even be a boon for you through, again, other people doing well. And this can even be a long-term thing. So for instance, if you know someone that you're comfortable vouching for and they are looking for a specific type of a position and you happen to be able to help them with that, that could be something that winds up then paying off down the road as well to help others in their resources and their security, can really help you as well. I do also see this as an area of the chart that speaks to inheritances beyond financial or property. So, for instance, genetic inheritances or emotional kind of conditioning, family pattern inheritance as well, we can see here, especially when it comes to psychological themes along those lines, especially, again, when we have Cancer in this place. So you may be working on healing trauma, you may be working on family wounds. And again, a lot of that is also going to be then along the lines of Cancerian themes of concerns about abandonment or care, feeling really safe and secure, feeling like you're able to be vulnerable, that you're able to be like a human being within your family and not just play a role. And even if your hand isn't really forced to address those things, if you know that that's something that would be wise to work through for you, this does represent then a period of time in which you can feel a lot more safe and supported, at least universally speaking, to do that kind of work. So it should be a lot less triggering and a lot more comfortable, as well as much, much, much more constructive than usual. Again, you could find your bonds with people really deepening throughout this time too. You may need to rely on someone or vice versa and have a connection with someone become that much more meaningful through that connection, through that experience. And this can transform those relationships as well through developing trust and intimacy and interdependency with others. And yeah, even beyond ancestral psychological work, just generally speaking, the parts of your psyche which are related to other people. So things like social anxieties, things like control issues, trust issues, codependencies, fears of abandonment, anything that's to do with the social connection, which I think it probably encompasses honestly most of our like psychological concerns as humanity, since we are a social species. But this is a really wonderful time to, again, address those kinds of things, as well as any sort of spiritual trust work as well. So you may find yourself feeling really spiritually supported or like supported from the other side, basically. And you may have a lot of themes of evidence of support from you, from the other side coming through during this time. So feeling like you almost have a kind of guardian angel on the other side, but often feeling like initially you don't quite trust it. I would really expect some synchronicities and some sense of being clearly protected along more than just probabilistic lines playing out through this time as well. This can also be an extension really of a period of time, which would be pretty typical for marrying someone. So joining, tying your resources with someone else, tying your life and your standing basically to someone else. So this can be an indicator of marriage. And if that is something that you've recently done this past year with Jupiter in your 7th house, which is also pretty standard read of that kind of a transit, this can be just settling in and getting a lot more comfortable with that, possibly seeing the messier sides of each other, but feeling probably more comfortable with exposing yourself and your humanness basically to another person too, and feeling quite supported. There could also be some themes for sure that wind up coming up in this year around people passing. I don't mean to indicate that out of the blue someone's going to pass or anything like that, but it's more likely that this is just something that is on your mind in order for you to become more comfortable with and to come to terms with more. And it's not even really a matter of a pressing issue to have to deal with, but it might just be there in the background. And so if you're thinking about mortality basically more throughout this time, it's not just that you're becoming more of a morbid person. That would definitely be indicated by this transit too, and that being brought up again to make you feel a little bit more comfortable with that then. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Capricorn, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 7th house of partnerships, relationships, other people that tend to be pretty close to you in your life. And so the standard read of this is basically a proliferation or enriching of relationship throughout this time. One of the standard ways that this can play out is a partner presenting themselves in your life. So meeting someone who winds up becoming a partner, be it romantic or a really good friend or a significant business partner. Meeting them or starting a connection that is deeper with them. And additionally, then the proliferation of relationships. So just a lot more people showing up in your life, which can, of course, be quite supportive. But of course, at times, this could wind up being a bit overwhelming, especially if you really want to cultivate as many of those relationships as you can. So this may be a year that you would perceive as being very busy because of the fact that you're needing to engage and interface with a lot more people. You could even, if you have a public-facing career where it's you out there making connections with people, that's a really big part of it. And even beyond career, like some significant part of your life, that could feel like it's kind of taking over around this time, but in a really good way where that's going over super well. People seem to be taking you quite well. They seem more approachable and more willing to connect and more pleased by your presentation, basically. They're more agreeable, is more so what I mean. You could also really find that there are people who are really wanting to support you. So even beyond how it is that you are coming off, just a desire on the part of the people that you engage with. Again, it's kind of, I guess, a different form of agreeability, but a desire on the part of people that you're connecting with to support you. And so you could wind up making some really, really beneficial connections with people during this time, possibly even some relatively high profile people with Jupiter here. So people who are very capable of being able to help and support and give you a leg up. They may even have some really wonderful advice. So this would be a great time to connect with a mentor that is of some great significance to your life too. And this could be in business, but it could even be something of a spiritual mentor, or just even if it's some sort of public figure that offers a really good example that you want to follow throughout this time. There's basically a lot of really good influences available to you. And yeah, those connections that you have, not just more supportive, but also more caring, more nourishing, more taking you under their wing, more maternal, ultimately. If you're dating, this can signify getting engaged or getting married, making moves along those lines. If you already are married, this can indicate a really positive period of time for the relationship. So not to start just picking at wounds willy-nilly, but if there is anything that you do feel you've been a little bit afraid to address because you're not quite sure how it's going to go, this would help it to go better than usual. So it might be a decent time to just address certain things here and there in a very considerate way that recognizes the humanity both of yourself and of your partner. And so healing those emotional boundaries with people as well, feeling like you're being more respected, including your boundaries. And when it comes to the ebbs and flows of Cancer here, kind of really co-regulating in your partnership. So being able to read each other better, being able to adjust to each other better without the extreme highs and lows. This is more of a kind of easy upward and downward flow of your emotional connection to someone that feels a little bit more organic and natural and healthy. Being able to find that happy medium with people a lot easier. Also, when it comes to collaborating with people, this is very fruitful. So if you've thought about going into business with someone, you basically have 2 really solid years to get something off the ground here. So you could start a partnership with someone around this time and then have it become more profitable next year as well, if that's something that you are going after, of like a fertile business venture with someone else, or a public facing, like you going into business with yourself and courting clients. And I know a lot of these things are so based on social right now. So the social media aspect of business, that should be going over well during this year. But when it comes to collaborations, if you've been considering doing something like that, getting involved in your community more, if you've been desiring to have your natural Cancer in the 7th house able to be expressed more in terms of taking care of people, but even on a kind of broad-based level of some kind of community organization or charity or giving, caring for other people in the community, this would be a really wonderful time to engage in that too, because it should feel quite fulfilling and rewarding. This could also be something going really well if you are, again, really any of those kinds of people that I mentioned in this, of significant people in your life. So it doesn't just have to be a marriage partner. But when it comes to the people around you, really good things happening for them. And so you may even be able to contribute to that, since this is showing up in your chart. but the people around you should seem a lot more positive and optimistic, which is, I think, a wonderful thing considering the way that the world has been feeling recently. And so you may then, that could even encourage you to get more involved in community if you feel like, okay, well, it feels a little bit less burdensome now to be dealing with people. And so I want to be able to express this throughout this period of time where the people around me seem to be exuding a little bit more positivity. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. It should be a really wonderful transit, so I hope that it treats you well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Aquarius, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 6th house of routine, wellness, that which you are willing to put your time and effort and energy into, as well as service to others. And so this transit is actually very nice for a broad specific reason, which is that it should help you to feel quite good. So this should be very encouraging to you taking care of yourself and to making that a part of your daily routine. So your health should improve under this transit, as well as your motivation and the reward for investment into your own health and well-being, basically. So not just that you're putting in more time and effort and energy into taking care of yourself, but that it seems through this time more like it pays off bigger. So for instance, if you have started an exercise routine in the past, and yeah, it's helped in certain ways and so forth, but it hasn't seemed to really give you the results that you were looking for, this would be a really wonderful time to try something like that again, or to step that up, because it's likely that you're going to see bigger results. Also, when it comes to your diet, this Jupiter, Cancer, 6th house, all of this kind of speaks to really good and healthy eating and being able to find a diet that really works for you specifically, that is giving your body what it needs. This could even help for finding specific health techniques or practices or, routines basically, but also providers that are really in tune with what's going on with you and that come across to you much more supportive and humane. So also, if you've been somewhat dissatisfied maybe with a doctor or practitioner that you're working with, this would be a decent time to put your feelers out to see if you're able to improve on that, if that is an option for you. Now, on the contrary, one of the more complicated aspects of this transit is that it can make you super busy, where your routine is full and where your task list, your to-do list is really overflowing with things to do. Now, on the other hand, this does help you to enjoy taking care of things more, help you to enjoy your routine better, help you to create a routine that works for you a lot better. And it can also really help with your productivity and the skill with which you accomplish these things, and also developing any sort of a skill set. So any sort of training programs, things like this, should really help a lot more than usual around this period of time. And you should feel immensely more capable. But the balancing act between the health aspects of this plus the tasks and routine aspects of this, I would really just, because of the fact that Jupiter can go a bit overboard in both directions, just try and make sure that you're checking in every once in a while. If you have low energy or something like this, maybe do try to commit to fewer things if you are able to do that, and try and keep that in balance. Because there are some significant but subtle work-life balance themes that can arise in the 6th house. When it does come to your working life, coworkers, subordinates, people like this, those connections should be supported by this a lot. So those relationships can be a lot more productive and can feel a lot more supportive and mutually beneficial. Focused on teamwork, basically, working together well and harmoniously. You may even find yourself engaging in more activities with your family and making family more of a priority within your routine. This is also, like I said, a very service-oriented house as well. And so you may feel very called to contribute either charitably or in terms of volunteering, helping to take care of the community around you, the people around you. So feeling very called to and rewarded and fulfilled by offering yourself in service to others. This is also the house associated with animals and other life. So you could certainly find yourself getting very into gardening or something like this, maybe creating little plots or something to grow your own food or just for fun, and getting a lot better with that. This should actually have a better yield than usual if you are a gardener. But also, so pets, your relationships with them really, really deepening. You may wind up then adopting another pet through this time and really feel drawn to a, specific little critter. You may even find yourself, in terms of like charity and community work and stuff like that, feel drawn to taking care of animals specifically. But yeah, generally speaking, I think that the best way to get the most out of this on a soul level in terms of this transit is just really tapping into what parts of your routine that you can make more pleasant and make full of these little joys that you can infuse your life with in order to make it feel more enriched and more satisfying. As Jupiter in Cancer will really help to magnify that through this time. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Pisces, we have Jupiter in Cancer transiting through your 5th house of joy, creativity, children, romance, basically all of the things that are very pleasurable in life, your own interests and hobbies and things like this. And so really across the board, this should feel like a really fun and lighthearted time. If you are a creative type, this should be a super productive and fertile period of time where you really feel inspired. So if there's been any creative blocks recently, this should really open that up, free that up. Another thing with this transit is that it does indicate super strongly fertility. So that is something to keep in mind. If that is not something that you are planning for in terms of having children, it would be wise to be careful and plan around that. And if you do have children already, those relationships should be deepening a lot. They should feel very caring, compassionate, supportive, really joyful, and really nice things could be going on for your children as well. This could be showing up as something that is going really well for your child or your children, and them generally being in a better mood. Now, they may have bigger moods for sure with Jupiter and Cancer in the 5th house, but they should be able to be attuned to having a more positive time with that. And beyond creative pursuits, again, any sort of interests or hobbies, things like this that you do for fun, that's also really supported by this. So you should be able to enjoy that even more, or to have those kinds of activities proliferate in your life to where you're connected to possibly new hobbies, new groups that are engaging in certain activities that you really like. This can also be a period of time where romance really flourishes. So you may wind up meeting someone that is of a lot of interest, where the connection feels really emotionally supportive. And this doesn't just have to be in terms of romantic relationships either. It can be a really wonderful friend that you love doing activities with, but you also feel like there's a really good emotional exchange within that friendship too. And even when it comes to money and business, I do feel like, especially if you are engaged in work that you really on any level enjoy, because of the fact that this is such a fertile place in the chart that has to do with your own personal self-expression, having something really wonderful going on in this house can also be a major boon to your career. You may also have opportunities to like go on vacation, to have a little bit more leisure time, and be feeling a lot more supported in doing that, to not feel like somehow you're doing something wrong by taking time for yourself. And when it comes to your self-expression, when it comes to you just kind of speaking from the heart, creating from the heart, sharing that, there should be a sense of your own authentic self-expression really being supported. And so any sort of inhibitions that you may have in this area too, this would be really supportive in having you work through those intentionally, because it should be a lot less triggering, and you should be getting really positive results and responses from that, to where you're able to break some of those habits of inhibition. Especially if any of that is from childhood, or a sense of unworthiness, or like somehow your self-expression is not welcome in some way, or that you shouldn't do that for whatever reason. This is a really wonderful place for allowing for your inner child to be able to connect back into your life and be supported, and therefore have you feel like you're able to be a lot more human, and therefore able to enjoy the life that you're creating for yourself a lot more, and feel like you belong within the more lighthearted aspects of that too. And yeah, any sort of passion projects that you have of any sort are likely to really flourish under this influence. And especially if there is any part of you infusing something with your heart, or infusing something with your emotion, your joy, that should feel very satisfying. So if that's something that you've kind of struggled with, of this is something that I'm wanting to do, but somehow I just feel like I'm missing the mark at times, this would be a time where that would be a lot easier, basically, to hit that mark, to feel like the emotion, the depth is coming through. Additionally, other than all of that, one thing that I really love about this is the house of enjoyment. So anything that you enjoy, if it is the music that you listen to in your car, if it's certain television shows or movies, if it's certain sports, going bowling, going out to eat, anything at all. What's so lovely about this is that it takes what you enjoy and it amplifies that quite a bit. So if you have been struggling at all with feeling a little bit more blah, or feeling like, man, I used to love this, but for some reason it just doesn't seem to hit anymore, this should really be juicing that up a lot, and really enriching the amount of pleasure that you're able to derive out of these either simple or completely complex aspects of life that we just naturally, organically enjoy. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much to everyone for being here and sharing this time with me. And I will see you all soon. Be good. Bye.